Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening. Here it is afternoon. I'm standing in Puerto Vallarta here in Mexico, attending the International Symposium of Fish Nutrition and Fish Feeding. I'm reporting here for International Aquafeed magazine and Fish Farming Technology. It's been a great week. It's 4 days of conference. They are back-to-back sessions, and there's over 300, possibly 350 attendees, and they've gone the duration of the days. I'm here with Brett Glencross. He is the chairman of the scientific committee for the ISFNF, and he's also with IFFO. And I'll ask Brett to tell us a little bit about the conference planning and how it has unfolded, but also a little bit of background about yourself first, Brett.
Okay, well, these days basically I work for the IFFO, the International Fish Meal and Fish Oil Organisation, or these days we refer to it as the Marine Ingredients Organisation, because we encompass a lot more than just fish meal and fish oil these days. I've been with them for about 3 years now. I sort of changed jobs in the middle of COVID, but prior to that I was the Professor of Nutrition at the University of Stirling in Scotland, where I did that job for about 6 years. So where we are now, obviously the ISFNF has been running for 40 years this year. It's a biennial conference. We run every second year. This is the 21st time we've held this conference. It's about the 4th or 5th time we've been in the Americas, and it's the first time we've come to Mexico. So planning for this event started about 2 years ago at the end of the previous event that we had in Sorrento, Italy, back in 2022. It's been a long road. There's been a lot of work behind the scenes. It's a typical iceberg sort of thing. You know, you only see basically a few people here on the day doing their jobs, but there's a huge amount of work behind these things actually to make it happen.
Yeah. And how has this one performed in comparison? We're a very long way from maybe where we usually are in Europe or somewhere. How's it performed?
Yeah, look, we're missing a few of the usual suspects in terms of the attendees at the conference. Our Chinese friends haven't really come this time, and we didn't see many of them in Sorrento either. Unfortunately, since COVID, the Chinese haven't really seemed to have come back and to engage at some of these events outside China. We're also missing a few of our European friends. Our European friends think anything more than 3 hours is a long haul. People like you and I, Roger, from the Antipodes, anything less than 12 hours is basically commuting. So we're sort of used to the idea of long haul travelling, but not everyone shares that philosophy, I think. So we don't have the French or the Spanish here, but we've got lots of Norwegians, we've got lots of Portuguese, we've got lots of Mexicans and lots of Americans. We're probably sitting around about the 320, 330 mark, I think. We'll have the final wrap-up numbers at this afternoon's closing session, but it'll be around that mark. It's not as big as what we had in Italy, but it's bigger than some of the events we've had before, certainly.
Yeah. And what are some of the take-home messages for you? What are the standout presentations or the focuses that we've seen, trends that we've seen developed over the last 4 days?
Look, there's a whole range of things that I've taken away from this. One was a classic one we had this afternoon from some of the scientists at the Norwegian Veterinary University. And what they were going back on about is looking at some of the health and welfare issues we're seeing with regards say salmon farming, and how much of it is predicated on the fact that the basic nutrition is actually missing sometimes. You know, our understanding of the basic supply of nutrients is not quite optimized because either raw materials are not being fully assessed properly, or our understanding of requirements for things like vitamins, as how they change with animal size or environmental conditions, is not quite complete, and what that leads to basically is a misapplication of requirements in the feeds, leading to then breakdown of immune systems. So to me the message there was we really need to get back to basics and actually understand the mechanics of what the animal really needs.
You might have a vested interest in this following question, but
what's that?
We have moved away from fish meal as a large proportion of the protein in our diets, and we've gone terrestrial grains and oilseeds, etc. Is that a factor in this shortfall of nutrition, do you think?
I think it's part of the story, but the reality is this is the new world we're living in. I mean, marine ingredients are no longer a bulk nutrient source as they used to be, say, 20, 30 years ago. We're producing 55, 60 million tonnes of feed a year now, or in that sort of ballpark. Marine ingredients, there's only 5 million tonnes of production of fish meal and 1 million tonnes of production of fish oil. Just do the basic math. It can't be a bulk supplier anymore. The current numbers that I've seen are around about 4.1 million tonnes of fish meal now goes into aquafeed, which if you look at the math, it's less than 8% of the formulation across everything. Now, what that means is it just has to be a strategic ingredient. We have to rely on better understanding and characterising and working with alternatives like the grain proteins, like some of the single cell proteins, some of these emerging ingredients. But there's a lot of work to be done to actually allow us to understand those better.
And do you think we heard that focus at this meeting over these few days?
we had a nice good cross section of a whole range of ingredients on day one. Day one was basically our ingredients focus day. So that actually had a look across grain proteins, marine proteins, single cell proteins, fungal proteins, insect proteins, and looking at the strengths and weaknesses they all bring to the table. And that's really, from my thinking, that's the way you need to approach the ingredient story. It's a story about identifying complementarity, how things work together. It's like basically picking your optimal team members to actually make the best rugby team. That some are going to be short props, some are going to be tall second rows. You're going to have your fast guys on the wing. You don't want all the same thing. You actually want a diversity in there.
Yeah. And I detected that there was this circular economy popping up along with consumer, an interest in what the consumers were seeing in our industry. Did you get the same feeling that we're sort of moving into sustainability in a different way? Yeah,
people are basically starting to, thankfully, look at the S word, the sustainability word, with a bit more objectivity. People, I think gone are the days where people just waved their hands and talked about, we're sustainable, that's all fluffy sort of thing. Sustainability now means something. It actually has an assessable criteria to it. And we typically use things like life cycle assessment, LCA, to use that way of assessing sustainability objectively. And we saw several talks where people were picking up on that, presenting data on things like carbon footprint, for example, and showing how different ingredients had different carbon footprints, and how that could actually then, well, in some cases we had commercial companies showing how that's actually now becoming an important formulation criteria. So not only are they formulating diets to say protein and energy and amino acid and omega-3 requirements, but also a carbon footprint objective as well.
And do you think our industry is understanding the consumer a little bit better?
I think they're getting, certainly they're increasing their awareness of the need to actually be mindful of what the consumer wants. I think it's completely probably captured to the extent that it needs to be. I think we need to do a lot more work on the communication front and how we engage, not just with the ultimate consumer, but different sectors of actually the broader civil society, and actually how we communicate the value proposition that aquaculture brings, and how we continue to supply that as a responsible food source for the planet going forward.
And you mentioned communication. We're in the communication
Absolutely.
business. We do our bit, but what more do you think we should be doing as an industry? Should we be individually involved in communication through our social media, telling people what is happening, the good things that are happening in our industry?
Absolutely. I think it's all incumbent on us in the sector to actually engage and use social media, use the conventional media, and particularly focus on telling the good stories we've got. I mean, there's so many good stories in the aquaculture space. We should be talking about how this is the most sustainable animal protein in the planet. We've got the ability here to actually have maximal flexibility in our formulations and still produce a good, responsibly produced product. Things like carbon footprint. Carbon footprint sort of aquaculture, it's amongst the lowest of all animal production systems and even food production systems out there. So there's some really good news stories we should be telling.
And finally, I'd like just to turn to next time out, in 2 years' time. I know we haven't closed off yet and you've got an important announcement coming back, but can you give us the inside running on where we might be next time around? So bearing in mind that this won't go out until after the event.
I realise that. Okay, so we have several announcements this afternoon. So after being on the scientific committee for 14 years, I've decided that it's time for me to step back and have a bit of rejuvenation and allow some of the younger scientists to step up and have a go at running that role. Obviously, that means I'm also stepping down from being the chair, which I've been the chair for the last 6 years. It's actually a huge amount of work, so it's been like working 2 jobs. So it'd be nice just to step back and do one job. We have made decisions about the next conference for 2026, and it'd be nice to return down under.
Yeah. Okay, well, I'll leave it there, but on behalf of us in the sector that services the industry, and I'm sure on behalf of everybody who's attended, thank you very much for the commitment you've made over 14 years, particularly in the last 6 years with chairing the scientific committee. You've done a fantastic job. We've been to fantastic places, and we've heard the latest that this industry has to offer. But Brett, thank you very much.
Thanks, Roger. It's been my pleasure.
Thank you.